Everyone thinks the 2018 trade war was about fairness. It was never about that. In March 2018, President Trump signed an executive order imposing tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminum. The stated rationale centered on national security, the argument that domestic production capacity mattered for defense. But the trade conflict went far deeper. It reflected a decades-long frustration over intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and what U.S. officials described as unfair market access. China had become a manufacturing powerhouse, and American policymakers saw a structural imbalance that tariffs alone couldn't fix. By September 2018, the U.S. had imposed 25% tariffs on roughly $370 billion worth of Chinese goods, everything from electronics to machinery. China retaliated with its own tariffs on American agricultural products, automobiles, and chemicals. The tit-for-tat escalation continued through 2019. By the end of that year, tariffs on nearly $400 billion of annual trade were in place. Neither side backed down. The economic friction became structural, not temporary. Tariffs worked by raising the cost of imported goods. When the U.S. imposed 25% duties on Chinese products, American importers faced a choice: absorb the cost, raise prices for consumers, or find alternative suppliers. Many chose the first option initially. Prices for electronics, appliances, and clothing edged upward. Businesses that relied on Chinese components faced margin pressure. The supply chains that had been optimized for decades suddenly became expensive to operate. The stated goals were clear: reduce the U.S. trade deficit with China, protect American manufacturing, and pressure Beijing to change IP policies and market practices. But the outcomes proved more complex. U.S. manufacturing employment did not surge. Instead, some factories moved production to Vietnam, India, and other lower-cost nations rather than returning to America. The trade deficit narrowed slightly in 2019, but that reflected weak demand during economic slowdown, not structural change. American farmers bore an outsized burden. China, the largest buyer of U.S. soybeans and pork, imposed retaliatory tariffs that devastated rural economies. Soybean prices collapsed. Farmers who had invested in equipment and land faced sudden income shocks. The federal government issued emergency subsidies to offset losses, ultimately costing taxpayers billions. What began as a trade dispute became a domestic political issue in heartland states. Consumer prices rose across multiple categories. A 2019 analysis found that tariff costs were passed largely to American households rather than absorbed by companies. Electronics, clothing, and household goods all saw modest price increases. The tariffs functioned as a hidden tax on consumption. Low-income households, which spend a higher percentage of income on goods, felt the impact more acutely than wealthier consumers. By early 2020, both sides agreed to a Phase 1 trade deal. China committed to purchasing more American agricultural and manufactured goods. The U.S. rolled back some tariffs, but kept others in place. The war didn't end, it paused, and the underlying tensions remained unresolved. The experience revealed how interconnected modern economies are and how trade friction ripples through employment, prices, and geopolitical strategy in ways that simple tariff numbers can't capture. The trade war demonstrated that economic policy and geopolitical competition are inseparable. Tariffs aren't just about prices, they are about power, access, and who controls which industries in a global system. Understanding what happened between 2018 and 2020 helps explain the trade tensions that persist today. If you want to understand how nations compete economically, subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown of geoeconomic forces reshaping global wealth and power. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research. Subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown of geoeconomic forces reshaping global wealth and power. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research.